In the underworld of New York City, there are men you run from and men you pray to. Lorenzo Enzo Moretti was both. By 32, he controlled the shipping lanes from Jersey to the Bronx. He had senators in his pocket and judges on his payroll. But on the night of November the 14th, 2023, the most powerful man in the city walked into the Gilded Spoon alone, soaking wet, and just wanted a steak for his birthday. He was laughed at. He was turned away. It should have been a bloodbath. Instead, a struggling waitress named Clara Dawson intervened with a single broken cupcake. She didn't know she was saving the devil's life, or that the devil would burn the world down to save hers. This is the story of the tip that changed history. The rain in Tribeca that night wasn't just rain. It was a deluge, the kind that slicks the cobblestones of Greenwich Street until they look like black mirrors. It was Tuesday, November the 14th. A Tuesday shouldn't matter, but for Clara Dawson, every Tuesday was a deadline. It was the day the rent check for her shoebox apartment in Queens cleared or bounced. Clara stood by the service station of the Gilded Spoon, one of those ultra-exclusive supper clubs where the menu doesn't have prices and the lighting is dim enough to hide 1,000 sins. She was rubbing her ankles. The heels the management required were cheap plastic things that dug into her Achilles tendon, but she couldn't afford the comfortable inserts. She was 26, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice her age. Her son Leo had a fever again. The babysitter, Mrs. Gable, was charging double for overtime. "Table 4 needs water, Dawson." "Stop dreaming," a voice snapped. It was Philippe Laurent, the general manager. Philippe was a man who wore suits that cost more than Clara's annual salary, yet he always smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and desperation. He ran the floor like a tyrant, terrified of the owners. A shadowed investment group that everyone knew was just a front for money laundering, though no one said it aloud. "On it, Philippi," Clara murmured, grabbing a crystal pitcher. That was when the door opened. Usually the doorman, a former linebacker named Tiny, filtered out the riffraff before they even touched the brass handle. But Tiny was on a smoke break. The man who walked in brought the storm with him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black trench coat that was heavy with water. His hair was plastered to his forehead, dark and severe. He didn't look like the usual clientele. The usuals wore Italian wool and Patek Philippe watches. This man wore heavy boots and looked like he had just walked 5 miles through a hurricane. His face was a map of sharp angles and a day's worth of stubble. There was a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, white against his olive skin. He stopped at the host stand. The dining room filled with the chatter of Wall Street bankers and minor celebrities seemed to quiet down instinctively. It was a primal reaction, like animals sensing a predator in the tall grass. Philip rushed to the front, his nose wrinkling in distaste. He saw a wet man, a rugged man. He didn't see the bespoke stitching on the coat or the cold, dead calculation in the man's grey eyes. "Can I help you?" Philippe asked, his tone dripping with the polite condescension reserved for tourists and lost delivery drivers. "I'd like a table," the man said. His voice was a low gravel rough from disuse. "For one." Philippe scoffed, glancing at the iPad reservation system he held, though he didn't actually read it. "We are fully committed this evening, sir. Reservations are made months in advance." The man looked around. "There's a two-top in the corner. Empty." "That table is reserved for a VIP," Philip lied. It was an overflow table rarely used. "Besides, we have a dress code. Jacket and tie required." "You are dripping on my foyer." The man didn't move. He took a breath, and for a second Clara, watching from the shadows of the service station, thought he looked incredibly tired. Not angry, just bone-deep weary. "It's my birthday," the man said softly. He didn't say it as a plea. He stated it as a fact. "I just want a steak and a glass of scotch. I'll be gone in an hour." Philip laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "Sir, there is a diner 3 blocks down. I'm sure they have birthday pie. Now please leave before I call security. You are disturbing the ambiance." The man's hand twitched by his side. Clara saw his jaw tighten. She saw the shift in his stance, the weight moving to the balls of his feet. She grew up in a rough neighborhood in the Bronx. She knew what a punch looked like before it was thrown. This man wasn't going to punch Philip. He was going to dismantle him. The air in the room grew thick. The man stared at Philip, and the silence stretched so thin it was about to snap. "Please," the man said one last time. "Get out," Philip hissed. The man turned. He didn't argue. He didn't scream, "Do you know who I am?" He simply turned around, his shoulders slumping slightly, the picture of a man who had everything and nothing all at once. Clara didn't think. If she had thought, she would have remembered her rent. She would have remembered Leo's fever. She would have remembered that Philippe had fired a busboy last week for dropping a fork. She slammed the water pitcher down on the counter. "Wait!" Clara called out. The room went silent. Philippe spun around, his eyes bulging. The man in the trench coat stopped his hand on the brass door handle. He looked back over his shoulder. Clara walked up to the front, ignoring Philippe's murderous glare. Mr. Davis." She improvised, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you with the coat. Your table is ready." Philip grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. "Dawson, what the hell are you doing?" he hissed in her ear. "Who is this bum?" "He's a human being, Philip," she whispered back, shaking him off. Then louder, addressing the stranger. "I have a table in my section. It's near the kitchen, so it's a bit noisy, but it's dry. Please." The man looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time that night, Clara felt seen. He looked at her frayed apron, her tired eyes, the defiant tilt of her chin. He looked at Philippe, then back at her. "I don't want to cause trouble," the man said. "The only trouble is you leaving hungry on your birthday," Clara said, flashing a smile she didn't feel. "Come on, I make the best recommendations." She grabbed a menu and walked toward the back corner. She didn't look at Philippe. She knew she was walking a dead man's plank. But as the stranger followed her trailing rainwater and the scent of expensive cologne mixed with ozone, she felt a strange electricity in the air. She had just seated Lorenzo Enzo Moretti, the Don of the Moretti crime family, at table 42, and she had just signed her own death warrant with her boss. Table 42 was the worst seat in the house. It was tucked behind a decorative pillar right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every time a runner came out with a tray of oysters, a blast of steam and shouting chefs hit the table. Clara pulled out the chair. "I know it's not the window seat," she apologized, grabbing a fresh napkin to dab the water off his shoulder. "But the chef Marco, he has a soft spot for me. I can get you the ribeye before they run out." Enzo sat down. The chair creaked under his frame. He looked out of place against the velvet wallpaper, too large, too dangerous. He took off his trench coat, revealing a black tailored suit underneath that cost more than the entire kitchen equipment. He undid his tie. "Thank you," he said, His voice was still rough, but the edge was gone. "What can I get you to drink?" "We have a vintage Pinot that—" "Scotch," he interrupted. "Leave the bottle. And water." "You got it." As Clara rushed to the bar, her hands were shaking. The bartender, a sympathetic guy named Jerry, slid a bottle of Macallan 18 across the counter. "Philippe is in the office making a phone call," Jerry whispered. "He looks like he's trying to call the owner. You're in deep, Clara." "I know," she said, her stomach twisting. "But did you see his face, Jerry? He looked crushed." "That guy," Jerry glanced at table 42. "That guy looks like he eats nails for breakfast. Be careful." Clara brought the scotch. Enzo poured himself a glass, filling it to the brim, and downed half of it in one swallow. He didn't grimace. He closed his eyes and exhaled. For the next hour, Clara made him her priority. She ignored her other 3 tables, a group of rude influencers, and an older couple who were asleep to ensure Enzo's water glass was full. She brought him the ribeye cooked rare, exactly as he asked. He ate in silence. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't look around the room. He just ate and drank, watching her. "You have a kid," he said suddenly. Clara froze, holding a tray of dirty dishes. "Excuse me." Enzo pointed a long finger at her wrist. She looked down. There was a sticker on her watch band, a sparkly cartoon dinosaur. Clara blushed, covering it. "Oh, yeah. My son Leo. He put that there this morning for good luck. I forgot to take it off. How old, Turnler? 6. Is the luck working?" Enzo asked, his gaze piercing. Clara laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "If luck is almost getting fired for seating a customer, then sure, it's working overtime." Enzo stopped chewing. He placed his knife and fork down slowly. "You're going to get fired for this, Philippe. He's particular," Clara said, trying to keep it light. "Don't worry about it. It was worth it. Nobody should eat alone on their birthday." Enzo stared at her for a long time. It was uncomfortable. He seemed to be cataloguing her features, the stray curl of brown hair, the fatigue under her eyes, the kindness that she wore like armor. "Why?" he asked. "Why what? Why help me? You don't know me. I could be a bum. I could be a criminal." Clara shrugged, shifting the heavy tray to her other hip. "My dad used to say that you can tell a man's character by how he treats the waiter. But you can tell the world's character by how it treats the lonely. Besides," her voice dropped, "my husband, my ex, he left on his birthday 3 years ago, went out for cigarettes and never came back. I know what it looks like when a man is at the end of his rope. You looked like you needed a win." Enzo didn't speak. Under the table, his hand clenched into a fist. He knew exactly where her ex-husband was, or men like him. He dealt with them every day. But this woman, this waitress with the dinosaur sticker, she saw him as a human. Not as the Don. Not as a target. Just a man. "I have to check on table 6, she said, breaking the spell. When she came back, 10 minutes later, he was finished. The bottle of scotch was half empty. "Dessert?" she asked. "No, just the check." "Wait 1 second, she said. Clara ran to the back. The pastry chef had already packed up, but there were a few stale cupcakes left from the staff meal. They were dry vanilla things. She grabbed one, found a solitary, half-melted candle in the junk drawer, and lit it. She walked back to table 42, shielding the tiny flame with her hand. "Happy birthday to you," she sang softly, so only he could hear. Enzo Moretti, a man who had ordered hits on rivals and negotiated multi-million-dollar drug deals, stared at the pathetic little cupcake like it was a gold bar. The flame reflected in his grey eyes, softening the hard lines of his face. "Make a wish," she whispered, setting it down. Enzo looked at her. "I wish he thought that I had met you 10 years ago before my soul turned black." He blew out the candle. "On the house," Clara said. "I'll grab your bill for the steak." She walked away to the POS system. When she returned with the black leather folder, the table was empty. Enzo was gone. He had vanished as quietly as a ghost. Clara sighed. Greater dine and dash, she thought. Felipe is definitely going to kill me now. I'll have to pay for the steak out of my tips. She opened the leather folder expecting it to be empty. It wasn't. Inside there was a stack of cash, $100 bills, a lot of them, and a business card. It was thick black cardstock with gold embossing. No name. Just a phone number and a symbol, a roaring lion. On the back of the receipt, written in sharp, angular handwriting, was a note. The luck worked. Buy Leo a real dinosaur. E. Clara's hands trembled as she counted the cash. $5,000. It was more than she made in 3 months. She looked up, scanning the restaurant. But he was gone. "Dawson!" The shout came from the front. Philippe was storming toward her, his face purple with rage. Behind him were 2 security guards. "Pack your things!" Philippe spat, knocking the tray out of her hand. The crash of silverware silenced the restaurant. "You're fired, and I'm making sure you never work in this city again." Clara clutched the cash and the black card to her chest. She didn't know it yet, but as she walked out into the rain that night, jobless and terrified, she wasn't alone. Across the street in the back of a blacked-out SUV, Enzo watched her leave. He picked up his phone. "Sal," Enzo said into the receiver, "find out everything about the manager at the Gilded Spoon, and find out everything about Clara Dawson. I want a tail on her, 24/7. Nobody touches her." "Boss," Sal's voice crackled. "We have the meeting with the Castillo family in an hour. We need to prep." "Cancel it," Enzo said, watching Clara hail a cab. "I have a new priority." The war for the city was about to start, but for Enzo the battle line had just been drawn in front of a waitress who brought him a cupcake. The Q train rattled underneath the East River, the sound of steel on steel, screeching like a dying animal. It was 1:00 a.m. Clara Dawson sat on the hard orange plastic seat, hugging her purse to her chest. Her coat was still damp from the rain outside the Gilded Spoon, and a chill had settled deep into her bones that had nothing to do with the temperature. She looked around the car. A man slept in the corner, head lolling back. A teenager with headphones stared at his reflection in the dark window. Nobody looked at her. Nobody knew that inside her cheap faux leather bag sat $5,000 in cash, a stack of bills that felt heavier than a brick. She should have been relieved. This money was rent for 4 months. It was Leo's medicine. It was a new pair of winter boots. But as the train lurched toward Queens, Clara felt a rising tide of nausea. She had lost her job. Philippe Laurent wasn't just a manager. He was a gatekeeper. The high-end hospitality world in Manhattan was a small, vicious village. Word traveled faster than light. By tomorrow morning, the narrative wouldn't be Clara helped a customer. It would be whatever poison Philip decided to spit Clara was rude. Clara was stealing. Clara was unstable. The train doors hissed open at her stop in Astoria. She walked the 3 blocks to her apartment building, a 4-story walk-up with peeling brick and a front door that didn't lock properly. Inside apartment 3. B. The air smelled of Vicks Vapor Rub and old boiling water. Mrs. Gable was asleep on the couch, the TV flickering with the blue light of a late-night infomercial. She woke up with a start as Clara turned the deadbolt. "You're late," Mrs. Gable grumbled, pulling her cardigan tighter. She was a stern woman in her 60s who loved Leo but had no patience for Clara's chaotic schedule. "I charge time and a half after midnight, Clara. You know the rules." "I know, Mrs. Gable. I'm sorry. It was a complicated night." Clara didn't make eye contact. She walked past the sitter and peeked into the bedroom. Leo was asleep, but his breathing was raspy. The small dinosaur sticker was still on his wrist, peeling at the edges. His forehead was damp. Clara brushed the hair off his face, her heart aching so hard it felt like it might bruise her ribs. "I did this for you," she thought. "But what do I do tomorrow?" She went back to the living room and pulled $200 from the stack in her purse. She handed it to Mrs. Gable. The old woman's eyes widened. She snatched the bills. "Did you win the lottery? Or rob the register?" "Just a good tip," Clara said hollowly. "Can you come tomorrow morning? I have the day off. I need to take Leo to the clinic." "I can come," Mrs. Gable said, eyeing her suspiciously. "But don't get used to flashing cash like that, girl. Easy money goes fast." When Mrs. Gable left, Clara sat at her tiny kitchen table. The linoleum was cracked. The refrigerator hummed a loud, broken tune. She took the stack of money out and set the black business card next to it. The Roaring Lion. She traced the gold foil with her thumb. Who was he, Enzo? That was the name on the note. He had looked at her with eyes that had seen too much darkness, yet he had tipped her like a saint. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the dark, watching the streetlights cast long prison bar shadows across the floor, wondering if $5,000 was enough to buy a new life or just enough to delay the end of the old one. Outside on the street below, a black sedan idled. The engine was off, but the windows were tinted pitch black. Inside the car, Enzo Moretti watched the light in window 3B. He hadn't gone to his penthouse in the financial district. He hadn't gone to the warehouse to meet his captains. He had followed the waitress. "Boss," Sal said from the driver's seat. Sal was a heavy-set man, with no neck and a history of violence that would make a prison warden shudder. "We've been here an hour. The Castillo family is moving shipments through the docks tonight. If we don't show face, they're going to think we're weak." Enzo lit a cigarette, the flare of the lighter illuminating the scar on his eyebrow. "Let them think what they want, Sal. Weakness is when you don't pay your debts. I have a debt." "She gave you a cupcake, Enzo. It's not a kidney." Enzo exhaled a plume of smoke. "She gave me dignity. In my world, that's more expensive than a kidney." He looked up at the window where Clara was sitting. "Run the background check on the manager, Philippe Laurent. I want to know where he lives, who he owes money to, and what he eats for breakfast. Nobody disrespects me, and nobody touches what's mine." "Is she yours, boss?" Sal asked, looking in the rearview mirror. Enzo didn't answer immediately. He touched the spot on his chest where the cupcake had settled, a strange warmth in a cold life. "She's under my protection," Enzo said quietly. Drive. Wednesday morning broke grey and miserable. The rain had stopped, but it left behind a heavy, suffocating humidity. Clara dressed Leo in his favorite sweater, the one with the rocket ship. His fever had broken, but he was still lethargic. She dropped him off at school, promising to pick him up early, and then began the humiliating pilgrimage of the unemployed. She had a plan. She would hit the other high-end spots in Tribeca and Soho. She was a good waitress. She knew wine pairings. She knew how to debone a fish tableside. She was valuable. Her first stop was Le Cuckoo. The manager, a woman she had met once at an industry party, smiled when she walked in, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Clara," the woman said, standing behind the host podium. "I didn't expect to see you." "I'm looking for shifts, Sarah," Clara said, trying to project confidence. "I left the Gilded Spoon last night. Time for a change." Sarah sighed, closing the reservation book. "Clara, honey, don't waste your shoe leather." Philip sent an email blast to the Restaurant Association at 8:00 a.m. Clara's blood ran cold. "What? He said you were caught stealing from a high-profile client's wallet. He said you were intoxicated on the floor." Sarah lowered her voice. "He marked you as do not hire. It's in the system, Clara. Nobody in Manhattan will touch you. Not with that flag on your file." "That's a lie." Clara's voice cracked. "He's lying. I served a man on his birthday. That's all I did." "It doesn't matter what's true," Sarah said, gently looking away. "It matters who Philip knows. He's powerful in the union. Go to Brooklyn or Jersey. You're done in the city." Clara walked out of the restaurant, her legs feeling like lead. She went to 3 more places. The reaction was the same. "We aren't hiring. Please leave. We heard about the incident." By 2:00 p.m. she was sitting on a park bench in Washington Square Park, watching pigeons fight over a crust of bread. She felt like the crust. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was the landlord. "Rent is 4 days late. Pay by Friday, or I start eviction papers." Clara put her head in her hands. The $5,000 was in her bank account now. But how long would it last? Without a job, without a reference. She was in a free fall. She pulled out the black card with the lion symbol. She had almost thrown it away twice. Call me, the note had implied. But call him for what? He was a customer, a rich, sad man. What could he do? He was probably an investment banker or a lawyer. He couldn't fix a lie spread by a vengeful manager. But she had no options left. While Clara sat in the park, the atmosphere inside the Gilded Spoon was tense. It was 3:00 p.m. prep time. The dining room was empty, save for the staff setting tables. Philip Law was in his office, laughing into the phone. "Yes, she's finished." Philip smirked, swirling a glass of midday Chardonnay. "I made sure of it. Little rat thought she could undermine me. She'll be flipping burgers in the Bronx by Monday." He hung up the phone and checked his watch. He had a meeting with his investors later. He owed a significant amount of money to the Castillo crime family gambling debts he had been skimming from the restaurant's profits to pay off. But he was short this month. He needed to squeeze the staff harder. The front door of the restaurant opened. "We are closed," Philippe shouted from his office doorway, not bothering to look up. "Dinner service starts at 5. "I'm not here for dinner." The voice was low, gravelly, and instantly recognizable. Philippe froze. He looked up. Standing in the foyer was the man from last night. But today he wasn't wet. He wasn't wearing a trench coat. He was wearing a slate-grey Italian suit that fit him like armor. And he wasn't alone. 2 men stood behind him. One was Sal. The other was a man known on the streets only as the Barber, because of how close he cut things with his straight razor. Philippe's Chardonnay glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. "You," Philippe whispered. Enzo Moretti walked into the restaurant. He didn't rush. He walked with the terrifying calm of a man who owns the ground he steps on. He walked right past the stunned busboys and the terrified hostess. He walked into Philippe's office and closed the door. Sal and the barber stood outside, arms crossed, blocking the exit. Inside the office, the air turned freezing. Enzo didn't sit. He stood by the window looking out at the street. "Who are you?" Philippe stammered, backing up against his desk. "I'll call the police. I have an alarm." Enzo turned slowly. "You won't call the police, Philippe. Because if the police come, they'll look at your books. And if they look at your books, they'll see you've been stealing from the Castillos. And we both know what the Castillos do to thieves." Felipe's face went the color of curdled milk. "How? How do you know that?" "I know everything," Enzo said. He walked over to the desk and picked up the iPad where Philippe kept the reservation system and the employee blacklist. "You fired Clara Dawson," Enzo stated. She was incompetent. She broke protocol." "She fed me," Enzo said, "when you tried to throw me out like a stray dog. She fed me, and you punished her for it." Enzo leaned across the desk. The predator was out now. His grey eyes were devoid of mercy. "You sent an email this morning," Enzo said softly. "Lies. Slander." "It's just business," Philippe squeaked. "No, business is money. This," Enzo pointed to the iPad, "this is cruelty, and I don't like cruelty." Enzo reached into his jacket pocket. Philippe flinched, expecting a gun. Instead, Enzo pulled out a phone. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Yeah, boss," a voice answered. "Release the information," Enzo said. "Done." Enzo hung up. He looked at Felipe. "I just sent your financial records, the real ones, the ones you hide to the Castillo brothers. They know you skimmed 50 grand last month." Felipe fell to his knees. No, please, they'll kill me. You can't do that." "I didn't kill you," Enzo said calmly, adjusting his cuffs. "I just told the truth. Just like you should have told about Clara." Enzo walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the knob. "You have 10 minutes before the Castillos get here. If I were you, I'd run. But don't run to Jersey. That's my territory. And if I ever hear Clara Dawson's name come out of your mouth again, I won't send the Castillos. I'll come back myself." Enzo walked out. He signaled to Sal, "We're done here." As they exited the restaurant, leaving a sobbing Philippe behind, Enzo's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "This is Clara. I found your card. I don't know who you are, but I'm in trouble. Please." Enzo stopped on the sidewalk. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. "Sal," Enzo said, his voice hard. "Get the car. We're going to Washington Square Park." "We have a war starting, Enzo," Sal warned. "The Castillos are going to be tearing the city apart, looking for Philippe. We need to go to the mattresses." "We pick her up first," Enzo said, opening the car door. "The war can wait." "She can't." Enzo looked at the text again. For the first time in years, he felt a purpose that wasn't about power or money. It was about the one thing the Mafia never offered redemption. He texted back, "Stay where you are." 5 minutes. The black SUV curb crawled toward the bench at Washington Square Park, parting the sea of tourists and NYU students like a shark moving through a school of minnows. It didn't look like a car. It looked like a weapon. The windows were reinforced polycarbonate, thick enough to stop a .44 Magnum round, though Clara couldn't know that. All she saw was her own distorted reflection in the tinted glass, looking small, pale, and desperate. The rear door opened before the car even came to a full stop. Enzo didn't wave her over. He stepped out. The change in the atmosphere was immediate. A group of skateboarders nearby stopped their noise. A street musician lowered his saxophone. Enzo stood on the sidewalk, scanning the perimeter with a practiced, lethal efficiency. When his eyes landed on Clara, the hardness evaporated, replaced by a strange, intense gravity. "Get in," he said. It wasn't a command. It was an urgent invitation. Clara hesitated. Her mother's voice screamed in her head. "Don't get in cars with strangers." But her reality screamed back. "You have no job, no future, and rent is due." She stood up. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling but audible. "You leave me $5,000, get me fired, and now you show up in this." "I didn't get you fired, Clara. I fixed the problem," Enzo said, stepping closer. He smelled of rain and gunpowder, a sharp metallic tang underneath his expensive cologne. "But right now, standing on this corner is dangerous. For you." "Why?" "Because the man who fired you, Philippe, owed money to bad people. And because I just destroyed him to settle a score, those bad people might think you're involved." Enzo extended a hand. He didn't grab her. He waited. "I can explain everything, but not here. Please." Clara looked at his hand. It was large, scarred, and steady. She thought of Leo waiting at school. She thought of the eviction notice. She took his hand. As soon as she slid onto the cream leather interior, the door thudded shut, sealing out the noise of the city. The silence inside was absolute. "Go," Enzo said to the driver. The car surged forward. Clara pressed herself against the door. "Where are we going? I have to pick up my son at 4:30. "We will pick him up," Enzo said calmly. He pressed a button, and a partition slid up, separating them from the driver and the front passenger. "But first you need to know who I am, and you need to decide if you want to run from me or stay." Clara stared at him. "You're not a banker." "No." "And you're not a lawyer." Enzo reached into the side pocket of the door and pulled out a bottle of water, twisting the cap off for her. "My name is Lorenzo Moretti. Most people call me Enzo. The papers call me the Don of the Moretti crime family." Clara stopped breathing. The bottle of water in her hand felt like it was freezing her skin. She knew the name. Everyone in New York knew the name. The Morettis ran the unions. They ran the docks. They were the ghosts in the machine of the city. "You're the Mafia," she whispered. "I am a businessman who operates in the shadows," Enzo corrected gently. "And yesterday you showed me kindness when I was ready to burn the world down. That makes you a friend of the family. And the Morettis protect their friends." Clara's mind raced. "Philippe, what did you do to him?" "I exposed his theft to the Castillo cartel. He is likely on a plane to nowhere right now. He won't bother you again." Enzo turned to face her fully. "But because I intervened, the Castillos will be watching me, and they will see that I came for you. They will think you are important to me." "Am I?" Clara asked the question, slipping out before she could stop it. Enzo looked at her, his grey eyes darkening. "Yes." The car turned onto the West Side Highway. The Hudson River sped by, grey and churning. "I cannot give you your job back at the Gilded Spoon," Enzo said, shifting to a business tone. "It is compromised, and with the blacklist you won't work in hospitality in this city again. Philippe made sure of that." Clara felt the tears pricking her eyes. So what do I do? I have a child, Mr. Moretti. I can't be involved in your business. I can't go to jail. I don't want you in my business, Enzo said firmly. I want to offer you a job, a legitimate one. Doing what? I have a home, a large one. I have a staff of security, but I have no one to manage the humanity of it. My chefs cook what they want. My housekeepers is clean, but the place is cold. I need a household manager. Someone to organize events, manage the kitchen staff, ensure the place is livable. Enzo paused. The pay is $10,000 a month, plus housing. There is a guest wing. You and Leo would live there. Rent-free. Safe. Clara's jaw dropped. 10,000. That's insane. Why? Because. Enzo looked out the window, his expression unreadable. I need to know that when I come home there is something real waiting there. Not just soldiers and silence. The car slowed down. They were pulling up to a private school in Queens, Leo's school. Clara hadn't even told him the address. He just knew. You can say no, Enzo said softly. I will give you $50,000 cash, and you can move to Ohio. Start over. Or you can come with me. Clara looked out the window. She saw Leo walking out of the school building, his backpack dragging on the ground, looking small and lonely. If she went to Ohio, she was alone. If she stayed here, she was destitute. But in this car, with this dangerous, broken man, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safety. I don't want to go to Ohio, Clara whispered. Enzo nodded, a barely perceptible release of tension in his shoulders. Good. Then let's go get Leo. The penthouse Enzo's glass castle sat atop a spire in Tribeca, 60 stories above the grime of the streets. It was a fortress of floor-to-ceiling windows, black marble floors and sharp modern art that looked like it could cut you. It had been 3 weeks since Clara and Leo moved in. The transition had been surreal. Clara had expected a dungeon. Instead, she got a suite larger than her entire old apartment building. Leo had a room that overlooked the Empire State Building. He had stopped coughing within 2 days, the high-end air filtration system scrubbing the city smog from his lungs. But the luxury was heavy. The apartment was silent. The guards, Sal the barber, and a few others moved like wraiths, standing in corners, checking earpieces. Clara made it her mission to break the silence. It started with the smell. For years, the penthouse had smelled of lemon pledge and cold air. Now, at 5:00 p.m. on a Friday, it smelled of roasting garlic rosemary and searing beef. Enzo walked in through the private elevator. He was exhausted. The war with the Castillos was escalating. A warehouse in Jersey had been torched last night, retaliation for Philippe. He had spent the day negotiating with corrupt port authorities. He loosened his tie, expecting the usual empty echo of the foyer. Instead, he heard laughter. He walked toward Tour, the kitchen. Clara was there, wearing a simple apron over her, jeans and sweater. She was chopping basil. Sitting on the marble island, swinging his legs, was Leo. And then the T-Rex said, "Roar!" Leo shouted, waving a plastic dinosaur. And then the Triceratops said, "Not today, buddy." Clara roared back, tossing a piece of cheese into Leo's mouth. Enzo stopped in the doorway. He felt like an intruder in his own life. This scene was so domestic, so normal, it hurt. Leo saw him first. The boy went silent. He was still shy around Mr. Enzo. To Leo, Enzo was the giant who owned the Sky House. "Hi," Leo whispered. Enzo cleared his throat, stepping into the light. "Hello, Leo. That's a scary dinosaur." Leo looked at the toy, then at Enzo. "It's a Carnotaurus. It has horns." "Does it?" Enzo moved closer. He didn't know how to talk to children. His world was men who lied and men who died. "Is he the strongest?" "No," Leo said seriously. "The T-Rex is stronger, but the Carnotaurus is faster." Enzo nodded slowly. "Speed is good. Speed keeps you alive." Clara wiped her hands on a towel, watching them. She saw the way Enzo looked at Leo with a mixture of fascination and terror, as if he was afraid he might break the boy just by being near him. "Dinner is in 10 minutes, Clara said, her voice soft. "I made braciole, my grandmother's recipe." Enzo looked at her. "You didn't have to cook. We have chefs." "The chefs make food, Enzo. I make dinner. There's a difference." They ate at the smaller table in the breakfast nook, not the massive, formal dining table. For the first time in his adult life, Enzo Moretti didn't eat alone, and he didn't eat with business associates. He ate with a family that wasn't his, but felt like it could be. "This is, Enzo took a bite of the beef roll, the tomato sauce rich and acidic. He closed his eyes. It tasted like a memory he had forgotten. "This is incredible." "It's better than the school lunch," Leo piped up. Enzo chuckled. A real sound. But the piece was fragile. As they were finishing, Sal walked into the room. He didn't knock. His face was grim. Clara immediately tensed her hand, going to Leo's shoulder. "Boss," Sal said, not looking at Clara. "We have a delivery. Downstairs." Enzo's face changed instantly. The warmth vanished, replaced by the mask of the Don. "Excuse me," he said to Clara. He stood up, wiping his mouth, and walked out with Sal. Clara waited a beat, then whispered to Leo. "Go to your room, baby. Play with the iPad. Mummy will be there in a second." Once Leo ran off, Clara followed Enzo. She knew she shouldn't. She was the housekeeper, not the consigliere. But this was her life now, too. She stood at the top of the stairs, overlooking the foyer. The concierge had sent up a box. It was wrapped in plain brown paper. Enzo stood over it, a knife in his hand. Sal stood back, hand on his holster. "Bomb scan was negative," Sal muttered. "But the smell—" Enzo sliced the tape and opened the flaps. He didn't flinch. He just stared into the box. Clara gasped from the stairs. She couldn't see what was inside, but she saw the blood drain from Sal's face. "What is it?" she called out, unable to stop herself. Enzo spun around, his eyes blazing. "Go back upstairs, Clara." "No. If I'm living here, if my son is here, I need to know." She walked down the stairs, her legs shaking. Enzo moved to block her view, but she was fast. She peered around his arm. Inside the box was a chef's jacket, white stained with red wine or blood. Embroidered on the chest was the name Philippe, and wrapped inside the jacket was a dead, severed fish. It was an old message, a Sicilian message. "Philippe sleeps with the fishes." But there was a note pinned to the fish. Clara read it before Enzo could snatch it away. The appetizer was delicious. "But we want the main course. Give us the waitress, or we take the whole kitchen." Clara stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. They killed him." "He was a thief," Enzo said coldly, crushing the note in his fist. "The Castillos cleaned house." "They want me," Clara whispered. "Why do they want me?" Because they think you're my weakness, Enzo said. He stepped toward her, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was hard, almost painful. Listen to me. You are not going anywhere. You are staying in this house. You do not leave these walls. Do you understand? Enzo, I can't put Leo in the middle of a war. He is already in the middle. Enzo shouted, the thunder of his voice shaking the glass walls. If you leave, they grab you off the street in 5 minutes. Here you are in a fortress. I have 50 men outside. I have snipers on the roof. He lowered his voice, his eyes searching hers. I dragged you into this. I will not let them touch you. I swear it on my mother's grave. Clara looked at the box, then at the man. She saw the killer in him, the violence that simmered just beneath the surface. But she also saw the desperation. He wasn't just protecting an asset. He was protecting the only light he had found in the dark. What do we do? She asked, her voice stealing. Enzo turned to Sal. Call the captains, Enzo said, his voice low and terrifying. The Castillos want a war fine. We don't wait for them to come to the kitchen. We go to their house. Tonight. He looked back at Clara. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Enzo grabbed his coat. He was going to war, and for the first time, he had something to lose. The night of the raid was not loud. Real violence rarely is. It is sudden quiet and final. While Enzo and his men descended on the Castillo stronghold in the meat-packing district, Clara sat in the dark of the penthouse, clutching a kitchen knife sitting outside Leo's door. Sal stood by the elevator, a silent statue with a shotgun across his chest. The city lights of Manhattan twinkled below, indifferent to the fact that the underworld was rearranging itself in blood. At 3 a.m. the elevator chimed. Sal raised the weapon. Clara stood up, her knuckles white around the knife handle. The doors slid open. It was Enzo. He was alone. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was ruined, stained with dirt and dark, wet patches that Clara prayed weren't his own blood. He leaned heavily against the elevator frame, looking like a man who had walked through hell and left the door open behind him. Sal lowered the gun and nodded once. He knew the look. The war was over. The Castillos were gone. Enzo stumbled into the foyer. Clara dropped the knife and ran to him. She didn't care about the blood. She didn't care about the danger. She caught him just as his knees gave out. I got it on the carpet, Enzo rasped, looking down at his boots. He sounded delirious. Shh, it's okay, Clara whispered, guiding him to the sofa. Let me see. Are you hurt? Not mine, he said, closing his eyes. Most of it isn't mine. He grabbed her hand, staining her skin with the remnants of the night. His grip was desperate. They are done, Clara. Philip. The Castillos. The debts. It's all erased. Clara grabbed the first aid kit she had prepared. She began to clean a deep cut on his cheekbone. It's over, Enzo. You're home. Enzo pulled back, his eyes snapping open. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the cold, hard reality of who he was. No, he said, his voice hardening. It's not over. I bought you safety, Clara, but I am still who I am. Tonight proved that. He looked at his shaking hands. You and Leo. You can't be here. You can't watch this. I have money in the safe. Take it. Go to the Hamptons. I'll send Sal to guard you. Clara stopped cleaning his wound. She looked at the man who had terrified the most dangerous criminals in New York, yet was terrified of tainting her. You're firing me again, she asked quietly. I'm saving you," Enzo shouted, though his voice cracked. "Look at me, Clara. I am a monster. I kill people. I break things. You are a mother. You bring cupcakes. You don't belong in this world." Clara stood up. She walked to the window, looking at the reflection of the room. She saw the luxury, the darkness, and the man sitting in the center of it. "You're right," she said. "I don't belong in your world." Enzo slumped, defeated. "I'll have the car ready in the morning." "But—" Clara turned around. Her eyes fierce. "You don't belong in that world anymore either, Enzo." She walked back to him, kneeling on the floor so she was eye level with him. The man who walked into the restaurant that night wasn't a monster. He was lonely. He was tired. And the man who played dinosaurs with my son isn't a killer. She took his face in her hands. "You wished for something when you blew out that candle." "What was it?" Enzo stared at her. The silence stretched heavy and thick. "I wished I wasn't alone," he whispered. "Then stop trying to send us away," Clara said. "We aren't going to the Hamptons. We're staying here." "But things change. No more blood on the carpet, Enzo. You legitimize the business. You get out of the dark. You use that power to build something, not destroy it." Enzo looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something stronger than any soldier he had ever commanded. He saw a future. "It will take time," he said. "It will be dangerous. I'm from Queens." Clara smiled, tears finally spilling over. "I can handle dangerous." One year later, the rain was falling in Tribeca, but inside the Golden Lion it was warm and bright. The restaurant was the talk of the town. It was impossible to get a reservation, not because of snobbery, but because the food was that good. The owner, a stunning woman named Clara, moved through the tables with grace, greeting senators and sanitation workers alike with the same warmth. At the back, in the best table of the house, table 42, sat a man and a 7-year-old boy. The man was reading a storybook aloud, doing funny voices that made the boy shriek with laughter. The man had a scar on his eyebrow and grey eyes that had lost their winter chill. Clara walked over, placing a single cupcake with a lit candle on the table. "Happy birthday, Enzo," she said, kissing him on the cheek. The entire restaurant went silent, watching. Everyone knew the stories, the rumors of who he used to be, the whispers of the war that was fought for this woman. But nobody cared. Enzo Moretti looked at the cupcake. He looked at Leo, who was eyeing the frosting. He looked at Clara, who was wearing a ring on her finger that shone brighter than the chandelier. He didn't need to make a wish this year. He leaned forward and blew out the candle. He already had everything he ever wanted. And that is the incredible story of how a single act of kindness, a stale cupcake, and a happy birthday toppled a crime syndicate and saved a soul. It reminds us that we never truly know the burden the stranger across from us is carrying. Clara didn't see a Mafia don. She saw a human being in pain. In return, Enzo didn't see a waitress. He saw his salvation. In a world that tells us to look away and mind our business, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is offer a seat at the table to someone standing in the rain. If this story touched your heart, or if you were on the edge of your seat during the raid on the Castillos, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Clara? Would you have run with the money or stayed to fight for the man? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more true-to-life drama and romance stories like this one, Make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind. You never know who you're serving.